Hello, I am MJ Stevens with the Southern Heritage Groups and will present a video on New England colonization and slavery. Another purpose is to set the record straight. First, let me show you two visuals. The first is a whiteboard behind me that shows the top outline of the New England colonies and below it the West Indies. The video will discuss the relationship between New England and the West Indies. Now you can also see on this chart, I have Boston, New York, and Philadelphia. At the lower part is an area down here that was claimed by Spain, which later became Florida. At the bottom is a list of islands in the West Indies. Here's a list of them down here, and Barbados is in this list and was usually the first island where slave ships stopped when they came from Africa. The second visual is a close-up of New England area, and this is Rhode Island, Massachusetts Bay Colony, Boston, Connecticut, New York area. Particularly note the items that are circled, and the items that are circled are the Indian tribes, and they are Pequot, Mohawk, Mohegan, and Narragansett, and some others. I just wanted to show you all the items that are circled that are the Indian tribes. Imagine the dilemma that settlers faced when they tried to settle in the New England area and there were the Indian tribes nearby. In early America, scientists named John Jocelyn traveled to America to take pictures of what he saw, such as crops, flowers, trees, and animals for people back home who had never been to America and were investors. Mr. Jocelyn was on a fact-finding mission for his investors. Large numbers of people were coming to America for the first time and wanted to know what it looked like. Mr. Jocelyn visited a friend named Samuel Maverick, and this is not the Samuel Maverick in Texas. This is a Samuel Maverick that lived in Boston. While scouting the Boston area, Mr. Jocelyn heard a woman screaming. She was doing this at the window in the house where he was staying. Mr. Jocelyn asked his friend Samuel Maverick what was going on. Mr. Maverick said an African woman had been raped by an African man, and of course she was upset. Samuel Maverick informed his visitors that he had wanted and this is a quote, breed of Negroes. So he asked a male servant to go to bed with her. So when do you think this was happening? It happened not in the 1900s, not the 1800s, not the 1700s, but it happened in 1638, centuries before the Civil War from 1861 to 1865. Now the next question is, where was this happening? It happened in Boston, which has no cash crops, and where stern Puritans lived. So here's a record of chattel slavery in New England, America in 1638 because Mr. Maverick wanted a breed of Negroes. Now, northern banks made huge profits insuring slave ships and using the slaves as collateral, and there were over 60 rum distilleries in Massachusetts and at least 24 distilleries in Rhode Island, where rum was made and used to purchase African slaves. In 1638, a slave ship named Desire, Desire, was built in Marblehead, Massachusetts. It sailed into Boston Harbor with enslaved Africans just 19 years after the first Africans were brought to American colonies in Jamestown. Over the next 150 years, an estimated 166 transatlantic voyages began in Boston. Over 1,000 ads in local newspapers advertised the sale of these Africans brought to Boston, continuing until 1783 when a Massachusetts court case put an end to the trade. Recently, I read this book, New England Bound Slavery and Colonization in Early America by Wendy Warren. And here's a copy of her book. She is an assistant professor at Princeton University, New England Bound Slavery and Colonization. Ms. Warren wrote that colonization and slavery went hand in hand. Native Indians were sold to the West Indies as part of the Atlantic slave trade, so New England imported slaves from the West Indies who came from Africa, and at the same time, New England colonists are exporting Indian slaves. When keeping chattel slaves under violent conditions, it's safer to export them. It was easier for New Englanders to sell the Indians at a slight profit to the West Indies. However, Indians had a reputation for being unruly, and they might escape and murder someone, so New England preferred African slaves. New England had no cash crop. What they could do was carry and provide for the West Indies, which I pointed out before, and especially since West Indies is growing sugar, the crop of its time. Miss Warren's book reveals that sugar crops were very profitable, but deadly. 50% mortality rates and higher in the islands. The leaves on sugar cane were sharp. There were hazards when cutting sugar cane. The plantation production of sugar was among the deadliest innovations known to humanity at this time. New England was deeply connected to this other world in the West Indies. New England colonists quickly learned that the West Indies meant money. The West Indies didn't have wood to create houses. They are not carriers for what they produce. So this is where New England stepped in the mid-1600s. Over half of the ships in Boston's harbor are going to and from West Indies. People coming to New England at this time were the Puritans. Miss Warren doesn't believe that the Puritans came to New England for religious liberty. They felt that the Bible approved of slavery. The English approved of slavery too, as long as with all of Europe. In Massachusetts, there was a man named John Winthrop, Winthrop, who wrote about the Puritan mission in New England. He was governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. In 1641, he helped write the Body of Liberty that legalized slavery. Massachusetts became the first colony to legalize slavery. Not South Carolina, not Virginia, not Georgia, but Massachusetts. A statue of John Winthrop is in the Statuary Hall in the United States Capitol and represents Massachusetts. On the other hand, in 2020, Virginia removed the statue of General Robert E. Lee from representing Virginia in the U.S. Statuary Hall. It's a double standard to have Winthrop in the Statuary Hall and not General Robert E. Lee. John Winthrop had a large family who were heavily involved in slavery. His 12th son, Samuel Winthrop, owned a plantation in Antigua in the West Indies. The father, John Winthrop Sr., did not object to any of this involvement with slavery. Miss Warren believes that in the minds of most people, colonization is sanitized. However, colonization is the process of removal and replacement and clearing of land and warfare. In one word, colonization means displacement. The work of colonization had proceeded as follows. Indians and Africans had replaced each other in ways orchestrated by settler colonists for the purposes of profit and expansion. In 1641, Winthrop's Body of Liberty stated that there shall never be any bond slavery or captivity among us unless it be lawful captives taken in just wars. They are Puritans, making sure that they do things by the book. They write down these laws in 1641, which are based on English law. If you read the body of liberty, it states that there isn't going to be slavery, but then there are these exceptions. So they do have bond slavery, and they have it early. They have it at the time those laws are written, as evidenced by what Samuel Maverick is doing in Boston's harbor. Remember, he wanted a breed of Negroes. Then comes the Connecticut Code of 1646. If you were a Native American and considered doing anything that is law-breaking according to the colonist laws, you could be legally enslaved. This is where the idea of just wars comes from, and the people writing the laws are behind this, so they are going to be just in their minds. The wars of colonization are justified for most English colonists because they are bringing Christianity and civilization to this land. The people writing the laws are the people who are behind all of this. If you are on the unjust side, you could be sold as a perpetual slave. Miss Warren writes about the human condition of slavery. They were taken from their homes in West Africa, and then they were removed from families in a war or a raid, then survived a 3 months Middle Passage trip in a horrible early modern ship. There were huge mortality rates on board, and you end up in Barbados. Most ships in the 17th century went first to the West Indies. If you ended up in New England at some point, you had to get on another ship. If you got off a boat in New England, of course, there were few, if any, other slaves, whereas the majority were in Barbados. It would be great if we understood that colonization was not a pleasant process, that it was a time of warfare and brutality, and it would be great if we understood that slavery was there right from the beginning, that it was embedded in the process of colonization, that in some cases it drove the process of colonization. Puritans had some sort of idealistic goals, but they lived in a pretty messy world, and it's hard to keep your hands clean in that kind of world. What have written illustrates that slavery did not exist only in the antebellum South. The following sentences were important and taken verbatim from Miss Warren's book. When I read these sentences, I said I had to include them in this video that I'm doing for you now. And here they are verbatim. The cotton gin was invented in 1793, and the Civil War began in 1861, meaning that King Cotton reigned for only one human lifespan of the roughly 3 centuries that the Atlantic slave trade affected North America. Narratives of American slavery that center on the antebellum era and result in emancipation and abolition omit the fact that most generations of enslaved people never saw political freedom enacted. This book enjoins a growing body of work asserting the importance of the 2.5 centuries to scholarship on American slavery. Such focus underscores that the 19th century divide of a slave South and a free North does not hold for the early colonial period. New England colonists were no strangers to slavery. New England, in a way, depended on plantation slavery. Their plantations were offshore, the West Indies. In conclusion, Southerners, don't let anyone point fingers at you. New England and the rest of the northern states were heavily involved in slavery. Don't forget the involvement of colonial New England and the North in slave trading and slavery. Thanks so much for listening, and please share this video with others. Now I have a link here to Ben Franklin's World, and there's more information about Miss Warren and her book, New England Bound. Also, for more information of an organization that I belong to, please go to defendarlington.org. Thank you again for watching and listening.